Hi, everybody, and welcome to our group critique for Milestone 3. What we're going to be doing in this particular group critique is just looking at everybody's caricature projects, and in this particular phase, we're taking a big leap where we're finally putting our character together in Photoshop and using the photographs that you have selected or revised. And then what you're doing is you're putting your character together using layer masks. And yeah, and so that's the main thing. And you're also going to be putting your name on the character just in simple text. Next week, what we will be doing is we'll be adding the next layer of or level of design. We're going to be designing the text a little bit more and then adding a background. So that's what we'll be focusing on next week. But for this week, it's just really about putting the character together. And so we're going to be looking at the layer masks themselves, see what we can do to perfect them if we need to. We'll take a look at the design of the character, and in general at this stage most people are in the rough draft phase, so we'll see, what can we do to make the character better. Maybe you need to rethink some parts of it or replace some of the photographs. That's typical at this stage. So really keep an open mind to feedback. There is going to always be things that you need to change in a project like this. It is really the nature of design. I think that's one of the very first things that surprised me about being in a design environment as opposed to a fine art environment. In a fine art environment, a lot of it is really just your particular vision for, in my case, I like to paint. And so it's my vision. It's like nobody can really advise me on what to do in general. But in design, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to communicate in a more sort of service-oriented way. By service-oriented, I mean we're really solving a problem for a client or our art director, and so we're trying to really develop a skill that communicates, and that is a pretty different process than what is the fine art creative process, which a lot of people who come to design actually have a background in fine arts. I know I did. A lot of people do, where you've just been really a creative person and you've just done your own thing and you've really explored things on your own. Um, and so moving into design is where we're more collaborative. It's not so independent. And it is still, there is an independent, like a lot of people still work very independently in design, but there's a collaborative element where we get a lot of feedback. Like you'll send a design to a client and your client will say, oh yeah, I'd like you, I don't know, and they give you a lot of feedback and then you have to incorporate it. Or, give them a good argument about why the design you've created for them is really strong based on your training as a designer. So we've got that kind of thing going on where, and I'm just sort of prefacing this to say, feedback is just a really normal part in design. And the sooner you can just feel comfortable with that and, get your bearings and feel a sense of balance with that, I think the faster you're going to advance as a designer. And that doesn't mean that you have to follow somebody else's advice on your design. You have to use your critical thinking skills to decide what works. But in general, if somebody says, I think that maybe this upper right-hand part needs a certain something to happen, sometimes people will give you suggestions based on their own way that they would solve a problem, which is what I sometimes do in this class because of the certain of the time constraints of this class, that we don't have a lot of time for me to just say keep working on that. I like to provide concrete suggestions, and sometimes I think it's really helpful too. But you can sort of take a certain kind of like, oh, that needs to be worked on a little bit more, and then you can solve it your own way because there's like hundreds of ways that you can fix a certain area. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's kind of like somebody pointing to the fact that your design needs maybe a little more revising, and then you can take the reins and decide how that goes, or sometimes you can get some help on exactly how that could work. Anyhow, that's all I really wanted to say here. So actually, before we get going with the group critique, I actually wanted to talk just a minute here about the previous task. And to do that, I'm going to use Mikai's assignment. If Mikai, I hope you don't mind. So this is the classroom in a book exercise for task 1, which is where you're learning about things like puppet warp and layer masks and all that kind of stuff. And I apologize because what happened between the last time I taught this class and this time, which was really only a few weeks, is that Adobe changed this particular chapter so that the videos and our examples in the instructions look a little different. You know, there's a different model. The model looks different, but in general, there's a lot of things that are the same. The background's the same, and the general tasks are the same. So you can still continue to use the video tutorials for this assignment. But I just wanted to point out that I think the model is different for this assignment. And so so essentially you can use the textbook in conjunction with the video tutorials, or you can use the video tutorials on their own or the textbook steps on their own. It's up to you. They're really the same thing. But what you're going to do is you're going to complete, I'm actually going to just, if you don't mind, I'm just going to turn off these layers here. This is what it's going to look like approximately. Yours might look a tiny bit different, but this is how it's going to look approximately when you're done. Then the additional assignment instructions are going to have you add an additional photo. And this is where you want to make sure that you're adding a photo and then you're going to hide the background using a layer mask. Now this is a little bit confusing because in the classroom in a book exercise, because of the nature of the steps, the background, even though you're using a layer mask, the background actually gets deleted. That's unfortunate for the classroom in a book. But when you're adding it, what's gonna happen? I right-clicked here to disable the layer mask, and you can see, oh look, here's the background. So the background was actually just hidden with the layer mask, and this is what you want to be doing for any time you add a photo. Is you want to try to, if you're masking something, you want to try to use a layer mask like this without deleting the background, because this is what's called non-destructive editing. So now you can go back and like make changes, you know, and you won't have to like find that photo again if you want to make a change to the layer mask. So this is what it's going to look like. So if I have some feedback in your comments area in the task submission for this saying you need to use a layer mask, this is what you're aiming for. Now, how can you get that? I recommend using the video tutorial for the caricature project that we're going to be critiquing later, because that actually has a really excellent video on how to really quickly mask a photograph, and so you can just use that video for this assignment. Okay, so I'm going to enable this again. So that's what you're going to be adding. You're also going to be adding a shadow, just like you did the shadow of the girl. So you can just add one. You can put it in approximately the same place. It's nice to be able to do that. Then the final thing you're going to be doing here is you're going to be adding an adjustment layer to somehow, you know, change the color of your added photo. And you can do whatever you want with that. And I'm going to click this on to show you. There it is. That's the change. That's the adjustment layer. And we did adjustment layers at least 1 week. Last week we did layer, I think it was last week we added an adjustment layer into the postcard. And it's exactly the same process where you add an adjustment layer, you make sure to clip it, just like we did last week. And there's also in the learning path for this week, hold on, the learning week, the milestone 3 learning path has adjustment layers in it as well if you want to learn more. Okay, so okay, that's it. So let me know if you have any questions about anything that we've covered in terms of this assignment. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense and you'll be able to, if you need to, make the necessary revisions. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, Dwight. Yeah, so first thing I'm going to look at here on everybody's is just to see whether you have the layer mask. And you guys, can you see all that? That these are all based on layer mask because we see the original photo here, and then the layer mask is here, and it's all hidden there. Can you see that? I just want to mention something here is that I've actually, I find when I'm working with layer masks, I like to change the view. Let me see if I can show you this. I like to change the view for the thumbnails, and let's see, it's in here somewhere. It's been a while since I've done that. Panel, options. I think that's it. Yeah, here we are, panel options. And you can see here I have the largest thumbnail available so that my panel looks really nice and big. Okay, all right, so the next thing I like to do is to just go down here. And so what happens with this assignment is a lot of people use white backgrounds for their images. White backgrounds in the sense that they have objects that are placed against a white background when they choose the photograph. And that's actually a very good choice of photograph for this particular assignment because it makes it easier to mask. But what happens later on is when we add a different background next week, we want to make sure that our layer masks are nice and clean in the sense that we really have masked them effectively. And so you can check this yourself. I'll show you how to do that. I just click on this background layer and then I just click on a dark color, can be like black or gray or something like that, and I just throw up a rectangle behind the image, just something like that. And that allows you to sort of see your edges. You can see here that these edges look really good. Can you see that? They look really like, you know, they look like nothing is, sometimes you see little bits of the background showing, or, and we'll probably see something like that and we'll be able to fix it. So it's not a problem, but it's just something that you can just check on. So I think that looks really good. I like the character design. I think it's looking really good. And I love the idea of wings. I think that's a really cute idea to add. So something I might try maybe with your wings is, when I first saw it, I wasn't quite sure it was wings. So maybe because they're a little small, so I might maybe make them a little bit bigger. You know, you can just take and going to go to that layer. So I like to right click. So when you right click anywhere on a Photoshop design, right clicking, it will show you exactly what's underneath it, and it'll show you, it'll kind of layer it. Like, so if you have a number of things stacked on top, it'll start with the top layer. So I know layer 10 is probably the one I want. And if I just click on that, it'll take me there in the layers panel, and I find that a tremendous time saving. So I don't know, I might make it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to right click. So no, I've selected the layer. So now all I need to do is hit Command or Control T on my keyboard, depending upon your keyboard, Command or Control. I think Command is the Windows command. So, and that automatically I can like do all kinds of things here with transforming, as you guys probably know already, but I can rotate it a little. Maybe it could be rotated. If I hold down the Shift key, holding down the Shift key and dragging from this corner, I can make it a little bigger, but it won't distort. So you could maybe play with maybe, I don't know, making it just a little bit larger, you know, so that it looks more wing, like it really could work as a wing. And other than that, I think it's looking really good. Just make sure to put your name on it somewhere. Whatever your character's name is, you know, check if you've forgotten, you know, check back on into milestone 1. Um, Flippin', is it Flippin' Food Fred or Fran? Whatever it is, just you put it in simple type anywhere on your design at this point. Next week we will put a background and we'll be, um, as I said, designing our text. So you can just do the simplest text. You know, just grab the text tool here and place it anywhere here and just type your text in. That's all you need. All right, good job. Good job. Okay, Christy. Yes, I agree with you. Selecting and masking each object is the hardest part of this particular assignment. Yeah, it takes a little bit of practice, but you will find that the more you mask, the easier it gets. You know, so for this particular caricature project, hopefully, you know, by the fifth or sixth, you know, object you start masking, it'll start to feel a little more intuitive. But practicing is really the key. Let's see. Yeah, so the PSD file, yeah, we do tend to generate pretty big files in this class. And it's just the nature. I mean, there is a way we can downsize them, but then you sometimes lose a little bit of quality. Sometimes the classroom is a little bit sluggish with uploading and downloading large files. I know, Christy, with you, I had to ask you to send me the file separately outside of the classroom. Thank you for doing that. And hopefully that's just a momentary kind of glitch in the classroom, but you know, just to let you know that these are bigger files and they do tend to uh, take a lot of bandwidth, you know, on the uploading and the downloading side. Okay, so here is Flippin' Food friend Fred. He looks very cute. And yeah, so let's start by looking here. We can definitely see, look at all that, all of your layer mask. And it looks like you've started adding some adjustment layers, which is wonderful here. And it looks like you said you were working on the lighting. That's really awesome. Feel free to share. It's something that we don't talk too much about in this class, but if you have any methods for working on the lighting, feel free to share them in the thread. They might be useful for other folks to work with. But yeah, you've added adjustment layers at this point. It's not a requirement for this particular milestone, but you guys know how to work with adjustment layers, so feel free to add them if you like. You can change the color of things. You can, play with different kinds of properties of the design. And the wonderful thing about adjustment layers is that they're non-destructive, so you can always turn them on or off or change them later on. They're very, very flexible. Okay, so I did this trick here of just checking the background here to see if the quality of the layer masks, and they look awesome. I don't see anything you need to change here. And I love what you did here with the mouth. That looks really great. I was concerned about how you would find a way to make something like this work with the mouth, but you did. And yeah, and the lettuce also inside the turtle looks really good. So I would say at this point, I don't think you need to make any changes with this. I think it looks really good as it is right now. You have the character built, the layer masks, and the titles. So I think you're good for this assignment. Okay, Alyssa. Yeah, okay, so yeah, so here are all the layer masks. Great, nice job. And I just checked with the black background here or dark background, and your layer masking looks really good too, which is great. I'm gonna just hold on a second here to zoom in. Yeah, look at that. That looks really great. And you've got your title, which is great, and you've got a background. And it's just fine if you want to add a background now. Just keep in mind, keep that you may probably want to work with that later on. Experiment with some different options. Same with your text. Next week we'll have really the whole week to kind of work on that in terms of the character design. So yeah, I think this looks good. I may suggest maybe the arms, maybe pulling them up a little bit. It feels like they're a little bit low and they're not quite reading as arms. Sort of thinking about if a peanut had a shoulder, where would that shoulder be? Like, where would it be coming off? I almost seem like it could be a little higher. Uh, and this is just something that, we experiment with as we work on the design. How do we make it as character-like as possible, that kind of thing. I really like this peanut photo. It was a really good choice because I think we talked about this last week, just how much form it has because of the lighting and all the beautiful curves. It really works I think, as a body quite nicely. The blueberry, I think they're okay. Somehow, I think because of the watermelon, because of the detail of the watermelon and the lightness of the blueberries in terms of the visual weight against them, they're not quite working yet. In this instance, sometimes what you can do here is you can experiment and say, do I need to have eyes, or could the watermelon read as a head without it? Like, sometimes, it's good to kind of think about pulling back with something. Sometimes you can sort of experiment with, okay, well, I really like this, so I'm gonna hold down the shift key. Maybe they just need to be really big. Like, I'm really exaggerating here, so, of course, you may not like that effect at all, or, you know, um, could be something, again, just sort of experimenting, just like, what could we do? I like exaggerating a lot with the character because I think that characters are often very exaggerated. So, I don't know. Is that better? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It's one of those things. It could not. And sometimes I like, changing the placelet. You know how lobsters have little eyes above them. Does that work? I don't know if that works either. But you can. So anyhow, this is where, like, my comments at the beginning, like, somebody sort of notices that something's not quite working, and it's up to you to kind of sort of figure out what you can do with that information, so you can go in different directions here. Maybe the blueberry is a beautiful image. Um, but maybe it doesn't work for your particular design, or maybe you could use it somewhere else in your design. Like maybe it could be the feet instead of the leaves, if you really like the blueberries. So sometimes you can really kind of experiment here. Again, I'm kind of liking the watermelon without any features, so that could be a possibility too. All right, well, nice work. Yes, those classroom in a book exercises are really wonderful. I mean, they do have some flaws, like sometimes people will say the steps didn't quite work, or sometimes I think there are too many steps. They have you learning too many things at once. But in general, I think that they really are a great way to learn the features of Photoshop. And it is actually how I learned Photoshop way back. I don't even know what version it was now, you know, back in the early days of Photoshop. So they've been around a long time. Anyhow, so I'm glad you enjoyed it and found them useful. So, okay, so yeah, so you've got your layer mask here, which is great. Nice job. They look really good. I already checked to see the edges and they look great. I'm hoping that somebody will give me some edges I can show how to how to manually mask the layer mask, but maybe we won't get that. We'll see. Yeah, so I think you've got your text, which looks great. So I'm just going to give, I don't think you need to make any changes to this assignment. It looks really great as it is. Just keep in mind that next week, you may want to experiment with different backgrounds. And your text might, change too. Although I do like this text, I think it's quite nice for your character. It's got kind of a light feeling. Um, the drop shadow. Yeah, shadows are really good with characters, and you may find we will be covering later on in the class, nothing that you need to work on now, but later on in the class we'll actually learn how to do a cast shadow so that you can kind of cast it anywhere in the design, and it's really a great way to work with the shadow. Yeah, okay, that's about it. Again, in all of the characters we're looking at, you can really see how, I hope you guys are able to see how when you choose a photograph, that photograph, um, even though we can do so much stuff in Photoshop, there's so much we can change in a photograph that we will be looking at. But you will notice that the quality of your initial photograph really makes a tremendous difference. Like I'm just looking at this particular photograph here with all of the beautiful lights and shadows and dimension and detail in it, and how that really adds to the character. Same with all the texture of these wings, all of the different textures and detail. You can, amongst many photographs, you have as the creative force behind this, you can choose a really good photograph and be really picky about it, and that will make a difference no matter what kind of design project you're working on. It is the raw ingredients. So keep that in mind. The magic of Photoshop is very immense, but it cannot take a kind of a really, not very good photograph and make it really great. It can only sometimes do that. Yes, so you use the magic wand to select the background. Yeah, and in Photoshop, back in Milestone 1, we looked at all of the different ways that you could select things, like with the magic wand. We also have the quick selection tool right up here. There's the lasso tool. There's actually, Photoshop has a lot of different ways to select things. So when you're creating a layer mask, you can really use any of them to start the selecting, your object. And then once you have done that, then you can just go down here to the layer mask button and apply your layer mask. So whatever tool you like the best, or you find the best for that particular photograph. Okay, yeah, so you've got all your layer masks. They look really good. I like what you did with your character design here. I think all of the movement you've added is very nice. It's something that we will look at in future weeks. You know, that we'll talk more about adding movement, but you've already added movement. So it's great to add. Why is it great to add movement to the character? I find that because the character is built out of these different objects, that the more you can do to make your character look alive, the more the objects start resonating as a cohesive unit. So that's great. So let's see here. Um, Something else I want to just mention here too is Normally when people work with very light elements here on the arms and legs or whatever appendages are there, that this lightweight can be something you have to think about. It's very delicate. So when you add your background next week, just think a little bit about really going very simple in the background. Really thinking about the contrast, like a really light background or something that will make sure that these delicate um, areas of your design stand out. And that might be, take some experimenting. And the background does take experimenting, so it's something we'll work on. But just kind of keep in mind, you really want to go like a very simple background for your design. Okay, I added a background here. And I noticed you have something going on here. I'm so happy you do, because I can demonstrate some things that we can work with to fix areas. And so can you see there's all of these little lines on here? You probably noticed that as you're working on that, and you probably thought, well, I don't know where they came from. And they're actually there's just a phenomenon in Photoshop that causes these lines to appear. What they are is they're actually part of the layer mask. So I'm going to just maybe, let's see here. Is this, no, I don't want that one. Let's see here. Hold on a minute. I'm going to just sort of do this manually here. See if I can find some that can turn off. Okay, there's one. So here, right here, you can see that there's this line right here. This is actually the edge of the photograph. For whatever reason, Photoshop sometimes does not select the edge when you're selecting and masking. There's this little row of pixels around the edge, and I don't know how to change that in the selection process. And what I will do is, let's see, where was that? Oh, I seem to have lost that layer. There it is. So what I will do is I will click directly on the layer mask, because when we're on the layer mask, we can edit the pixels of the layer mask directly. Not the if you're clicking here, you're going to edit the photograph itself, but we just want to work on the layer mask. And so what we're going to do is select black for our color, which we do have here. And whenever you're on a layer mask directly, the only colors you can select are white and black. So then what we do is we just grab our paintbrush tool, and at this point the paintbrush tool operates just like a kind of a paintbrush, except just with black. And what we're going to do is we are going to we're selected the layer mask, and all we're going to do is go along this white line here, and you can see how it's erasing, because what I'm actually doing is I'm hiding that edge on my layer mask. And so you can go through here, and all of these white lines, you can just basically go through and like find all the white lines. Here's some more right here. So we're going to select the layer mask, and then we can just once again click our brush tool and then kind of go over. Sometimes it helps to zoom in, just to get all those lines, but you can just clean those all up. You got quite a lot. So you might want to just like listen to some music or watch some TV or something as you do it, but it's easy to clean up. And that's it. I think that's all I want you to do here, is just clean up those lines, because everything else looks really good here with your layer mask, your design. You got your text. Yeah, your layer masks look great. I've already checked the edges and they look really, really good. Here, let's just do that together. So I'm just clicking on this background layer so I have somewhere to put this. And again, you can just see, just looking around all those edges, how the background looks like it's been masked very nicely. Yeah, and you can see all the layer masks in here as well. So that looks really great. So I would say in yours, just a few things here. One is for your text right in here, just put the name of your character. You can just grab this and put it in. It's probably Rockin' Rhapsody, or whatever your, Rockin' Rhapsody Roy, or I think Rita is the other name. So you can do that. And something else you might want to do in terms of the space is take your text and maybe move it up a little bit higher, and then make your character a little bigger, or alternately, I'm actually thinking you sort of have like kind of like a square character at this point in the sense of like taking up sort of a square space. So what you could also do is maybe just crop a little bit here and here. Why am I doing that? It's just because I have found that having too much space around the character, your character can sometimes get a little lost. And you can change it later, you know, if your character changes in the proportions, or you can always add to your background, you know, so it's not something that's static. Uh, and you could leave it now and just think about it next week, maybe maybe doing that. Um, and then the other thing I might do is to experiment with your character a little, just a little bit more to bring it to life a little bit more. It still has a sense of being a little bit like a collection of objects. And why does that happen? I think it's because we really need to recognize what the elements are. Like, so we would go, oh, these microphones are legs, and which I actually think they're working as legs now, you know, it's kind of four legs, you know. And then we kind of go, oh, so these are operating as arms. And I think that they are. But then we maybe, and then I'm starting to see this as a mouth and these as eyes. So I think that's good. And then maybe these are not quite working yet. Like we wonder, what are those? You know, what's happening with those in terms of the characters? So maybe they're a really cute element, but maybe they don't, maybe you don't need them, you know, or maybe they could become the arms instead, because maybe they could work down here and you could take these out. So you can kind of maybe experiment, you know, again to bring it to life. Like how could you, you know, maybe more, again, make it more um, like a living, breathing creature, you know? Like maybe you could experiment maybe making the legs a bit longer. I don't know, that could work. Or you can also at this point, I mentioned that we would be adding a little more movement later, but you could start adding movement now as well. Like you can think about, you know, just sort of taking different parts and, you know, sort of having them, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Just sort of maybe they'd be having certain movement, you know, so they would start looking like they're engaged in something. So I would experiment with that, you know, keep brainstorming just a little bit more about, you know, bringing your character to life in different ways. You know, maybe experimenting with the design, maybe experimenting with movement. Yeah, I think that's the main thing I would recommend working with. David, all right, so your layer masks also look really good. I've checked them and they look really nice and clean, which is great. And and it's such an important part of this assignment. So what I might work on with your design a little bit more, let me just actually look here with this layer mask, just potentially, yeah, oh, thank you. You've given me another opportunity to talk a little bit more about layer masks. So noticing in this one right here that there's a little bit of a sort of missing little bit here. This can happen. So what happens when you work with layer masks is Photoshop does its best to try to help you, you know, to mask things correctly, like along the edge. But it doesn't know everything. It can really do a lot, but you know, sometimes you'll notice, oh, hey, that's missing something, or there's a bit of the background that's still there. And so what you can do is you can actually, in this case, I would actually manually fix this. And what does that mean? It's actually very similar to what I did before about erasing the edge of the pixels. In this case, what I would do is instead of adding to the layer mask, I would remove this little bit of layer mask right here. So the rule is black hides and white reveals. So what we would do here is we would click, make sure you're clicking on the layer mask directly. Now, instead of black, we're actually going to reverse and use white instead. And we're going to pick up our brush tool here. And you know, you can make brushes. I'm going to use the bracket tools on my keyboard, but you can make them bigger or smaller. You can go up here and adjust them as well. I'm going to make it a little smaller. I'm going to zoom in. Zooming in is really the best way to work on this. And then I'm going to, oops, what did it do here? Oh, I had the wrong, I had the, I had the quick selection tool. They look very similar. Okay, so let's just do that again. Okay, so you see what's happening here? I'm bringing back that edge. Just like that. That's all I would really need to do here. But I just want to show you something else. You can actually go beyond the edge, and you can see I'm picking up now the background. I'm revealing more of the background. So white will reveal, and let's just now, I sometimes will go over the edge just to see where the edge is. Now I'm going to reverse back to black. I'm going to now just go back and just hide it. This is a really fun thing to do, just even if you don't need to do this in your character, because then you really learn a lot about masking just by doing that. I think I might have gone a little too far there. Anyhow, that'll do it. All right. So, yeah, so what I might do with this is keep experimenting with your character a little bit more. It has that feeling of not quite reading as a full character. So what could you do? One thing that I really always recommend is making your characters symmetrical. So you've got this is your right arm, and I like this right arm because it's sort of got a lot of, it's tubular, it's large, it looks like an arm, so I might choose to use it and make both arms like that. And it's really easy to actually take, instead of having to redo the layer mask, you just take this. I'm going to click this layer, hold it, drag the whole thing down. You see that the layer mask is actually dragging as well. And I'm dragging it down to the duplicate page, or the duplicate layer. It's this little page that looks like it's turning, right? And then that actually will duplicate the entire thing. And then you can move this. There's different ways you can, rotate it into place, but this is an easy way, So now it's already starting to look a little bit more like a character, So, and I might do the same thing with the feet. I kind of like the board here because it's more substantial. I might work with that. And somehow I might try to see, like, what can I do here? It looks right now like it's the torso's not joining up, like it's floating in space. So how could we fix that? I don't know. Like maybe what I might experiment first with is maybe just using this as my torso instead of having two torsos. Maybe, oops, sorry. Let's try that again. I'm going to hold down my shift key so that I don't distort it, but you can see I can just sort of make it bigger, and maybe that might make it, a little more substantial and looks like it's more connected. So experimenting with your design. I might move this up a little bit above there, so somehow I could join it up in there, so maybe the legs go inside this element, kind of come out. You see, you've done all the hard work here of masking everything and collecting all the photographs, and I'm just playing around with them. This is where the fun part is. But you could sort of have it go in to the leg. Yeah, so, have fun. Like, play a little bit more. Make sure you put your name somewhere, the name of the character, just in simple text. And I think that you're, yeah, on the right track. Terry. All right, so your layer masks look good too. Everything looks to me like it has a layer mask. I think the exception here is your rope. For some reason, I think your rope is missing the layer mask. So you want to bring the rope photograph back in and just mask it using the technique that you used for all of these. Yeah, I love this. This is a great element. The bones look really good. I like the rope with the cardboard. I think that looks really great. For the head, I think maybe the head's gotten sometimes adding features can be a little hard. So I'm not sure if I might turn these off for now and just look and work with the head as your apple core, which I think is a very cool element, and just kind of work with that. I noticed this photograph, I noticed it had some problems. Uh, um, I mentioned this maybe last week, hopefully I did, is that it looks like there's something going on with it there's bits missing in it. I wonder how that happened. I'm not 100% sure. Like, there's sort of parts that have been deleted. So I would get a new Apple Core. There's going to be like a bunch of Apple Cores on Google Images. Replace that with something that is clean, that doesn't have bits missing. I think that'll look a lot better. Um, yeah. Okay, so let's see. I think that's the main thing. You want to have the name of your character right here. Final thing, so with your feet, I think you've done it's a great idea to have your feet going into the box. that is going to make it look realistic. But I'm going to show you one other thing you can do to make it look like it really is actually going into the box. And let's do it on this one. And so I'm going to just, I mentioned already that your background was missing here for for your rope. It was the background was deleted rather than a layer mask. So that's going to change a little bit of what I'm talking about, but I hope you'll get the gist of it. So I'm going to start by disabling the layer mask here so we can see this is the original box. So what I'd like to see happening is to have this rope actually go into the box without having to delete this background, right? Like the cardboard here. And there's a way to do that. It's not very hard, but to do that, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to start by deleting the layer mask, and we're going to start from scratch here. It's much easier. When you've worked on a layer mask, sometimes it can be easier to start from scratch. So I'm going to, and if you want to make a change to it, I'm going to use the quick selection tool and just grab this just quickly like that. Then I'm going to go down here. I'm going to hit that button. Okay, so there we got our layer mask. That was pretty easy. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this rope right here, and I'm going to put it above the cardboard box so it's going to flow in front of it. Here we go, right here. There it goes. Okay, and we're almost done. So now all you need to do is, what do you need to do here? What you need to do here is you need to mask over this part to hide this part, right? Again, this is where once you bring back your original photograph, you'll have the entire photograph there, and you can start by masking it just like you would normally mask. And then what you can do is take this second step, and I'm going to click on the layer mask here, and I'm going to go up to the brush tool here using black. And now what I'm going to do, it's just this technique that we've been exploring here, is I'm going to hide. You see I'm hiding all of this? I'm going to hide it all the way here, right here, all the way around here. So I'm kind of just zoom in a little bit more. I'm going to actually I ended up going a little bit over here. Not that actually kind of works pretty good. But you could also, let's go back in here. I've gone a little bit over, so what I can actually do now is I can switch to white here, and then I can just make my brush, and then I can go back in here and kind of clean it up, because this is where I went over, because it's hard to see when you're masking. It's hard to see sometimes what you're doing, so sometimes you have to work back and forth, adding and subtracting from your mask. So that's it. Now you've got the rope going into the box. All right, okay, so that's what I'd like you to work on. I think things are coming along nicely. Eden, all right, you, I think, have maybe Terrible Toys Todd. And so in yours, what you want to do is you want to make sure that each of the photos is using a layer mask to hide the background. So what you're going to end up with is the background's hidden rather than deleted. So the video tutorial for this particular assignment is really good. It'll walk you through the steps. So I would use that and reassemble your Photoshop file so that you're getting those layer masks in. So that's the main thing I'd like you to work with. If you have time, add in the name of your character. It's one of the requirements as well. We could talk a little bit more about the design, but I think that getting the layer mask, maybe we'll hold off on that and talk more about that next week. And we'll talk, and so focus on the layer masks and then the title. All right. So let me know if you have any questions. But again, the video tutorial is really, really helpful. And yeah, okay. I think that's it, everybody. Let me just double check to make sure we've got everybody. Okay, we do. All right. Have a great rest of the week, everybody.